A homeless man cried over a broken phone every day. When a poor black teen finally approached him, she discovered a truth that would change both their lives forever. The alarm blared at 5:30 a.m., and Jasmine's hand shot out from under the thin blanket to silence it before it could wake her mother. She felt the familiar weight of her mom's arm across her waist. Sharing a twin bed meant personal space was a luxury they couldn't afford. The springs creaked as Jasmine carefully extracted herself from the bed. "Baby," her mother mumbled, half asleep. "It's not time yet. Go back to sleep, Mom. I got this." Jasmine's whisper was barely audible as she fumbled for her phone's flashlight. The screen's glow revealed their cramped Chicago apartment. Really just one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom smaller than most closets. The linoleum floor was cold under her feet as she made her way to the mini fridge. 2 eggs left. Jasmine cracked them into a bowl, added a splash of water, and whisked them with a fork. The pan scraping against the electric burner seemed too loud in the pre-dawn quiet. Her mother stirred again. "You don't have to. Mom, please. Sleep. You got home at midnight." Jasmine watched the eggs cook, pushing them around with the spatula. Her mother had worked a double shift at the diner yesterday, then cleaned offices until late. The least Jasmine could do was handle breakfast. The scrambled eggs done, Jasmine divided them onto 2 plates, adding the last piece of toast to her mother's portion. She grabbed something at school. Maybe Angela would share her lunch again. Her mother's work uniform lay crumpled on their single chair. Jasmine shook it out and hung it up, then gathered her own clothes for school. The bathroom mirror showed her reflection in patches through the water stains, dark skin, high cheekbones like her mother's, and long braids with faded purple streaks that needed touching up. Her school uniform had seen better days, the white collar slightly gray despite repeated washing. "Baby, come eat with me." Her mother was sitting up now, plate balanced on her lap. The shadows under her eyes looked almost like bruises. Jasmine sat on the edge of the bed. "How was work?" "Same as always." Mrs. Henderson complained about the windows again. She took a small bite of toast, making it last. "You got that math test today?" "Tomorrow. I'll study at the library after my shift." Her mother nodded, then frowned at Jasmine's empty hands. "Where's your plate?" "Already ate." The lie came easily after months of practice. "Gotta go, Mom. Love you." Outside, the early morning air bit through Jasmine's thin jacket. She adjusted her backpack, heavy with borrowed textbooks, and started the familiar 40-minute walk to school. The streets were quiet except for delivery trucks and a few other early risers hurrying to work. 3 blocks in, she saw him, the homeless man she'd been watching for weeks. Unlike the others who clustered around the shelter 2 streets over, he sat alone on his bench, back straight despite his ragged clothes. Today, like every day recently, he held a broken phone in his weathered hands, staring at its shattered screen. Jasmine slowed her pace. His eyes were red-rimmed, tears tracking down his cheeks into his gray-streaked beard. Something about his dignity, the way he wiped his face with a relatively clean handkerchief, made her chest tight. He reminded her of someone. The memory hit hard. Her father's back as he walked away 6 years ago, suitcase in hand. He hadn't even looked back at 8-year-old Jasmine standing in the doorway. She shook her head, pushing the thought away, and picked up her pace. The homeless man never asked for money or food, never bothered anyone. He just sat there with his broken phone, crying silently every morning. The school building loomed ahead, red brick darkened by decades of city grime. Students in various states of uniform compliance were already gathering on the front steps. Jasmine spotted Angela and made her way over. "Girl, you look tired," Angela said by way of greeting. "Here?" She pulled a slightly squashed banana from her bag. "My mom bought too many again." Jasmine's pride warred briefly with her empty stomach. "Thanks," she said, taking the fruit. They both knew it wasn't an accident. Angela's mom had been buying too much food ever since she figured out Jasmine's situation. The morning passed in a blur of classes, Jasmine's stomach growling despite the banana. During lunch, she headed to the library, claiming homework, but really just wanting to avoid the cafeteria smells. She was organizing the returns cart when her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Need to talk when you get home." Important. Jasmine's heart rate picked up. Last time she'd gotten a text like that, they'd had to move from their old apartment with 2 days' notice. She texted back a quick okay and tried to focus on shelving books, but worry gnawed at her gut. The rest of the school day crawled by. During her library shift after classes, she made 3 mistakes sorting books, earning a concerned look from Mrs. Peterson, the head librarian. "Everything all right, Jasmine? You seem distracted." "I'm fine, ma'am. Just tired." Jasmine forced a smile. "Is it okay if I take these history books home again? For the test next week?" "Of course, dear. But remember they're due back Monday." The walk home seemed longer than usual. The homeless man was still on his bench, hunched over now, the broken phone clutched to his chest. As Jasmine passed, she heard a muffled sob. She hesitated, one foot hovering mid-step. She should keep walking. They had their own problems, but the man looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time. His face was lined with age and hardship, but his eyes, they were kind and filled with such grief that Jasmine had to look away. "I'm sorry," he said softly, his voice rough but educated. "I didn't mean to frighten you." "You didn't," Jasmine replied automatically. Are you okay?" He smiled, but it looked more like a grimace. "No, young lady, I don't believe I am." He glanced down at the phone. "But don't let an old man's troubles worry you." Jasmine shifted her backpack. "What happened to your phone?" "Dropped it last week during—" He gestured vaguely at his ragged clothes. "Doesn't matter now. Everything's gone anyway." His voice cracked on the last word. Before Jasmine could respond, her own phone buzzed again. Another text from her mother. "Where are you? Please come home now." I have to go," she said. "I'm sorry." The man nodded. "Of course. Be safe, young lady." Jasmine hurried the rest of the way home, taking the stairs 2 at a time to their third-floor apartment. She found her mother sitting on their bed, holding an official-looking letter. "Mom? What's wrong?" Her mother looked up, eyes red. "They're selling the building, baby. We've got 30 days to get out." Jasmine's legs went weak. She sat heavily on the floor, her backpack thumping beside her. "But where will we go?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out." Her mother tried to smile. "We always do, right?" Jasmine nodded numbly, thinking of the homeless man and his broken phone, of lost homes and broken things, and the way life could shatter in an instant. "Right?" she whispered. "We always do." Jasmine barely slept that night. The eviction notice sat on their small kitchen counter, its white edges gleaming in the darkness like teeth. Her mother's breathing was uneven beside her. She wasn't sleeping either. Morning came too soon. This time, Jasmine didn't bother with breakfast. Her stomach was too knotted to eat anyway. She left while her mother was in the shower, the sound of running water masking her quiet exit. The walk to school felt different today. Every storefront window reflected her worried face. Every passing car made her wonder if its driver had a real home. When she reached the homeless man's bench, she slowed down. He was there as always, but today he wasn't crying. Instead, he stared at the broken phone with a focus so intense it made Jasmine stop completely. "Sir?" The word came out before she could stop it. He looked up, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Ah, the kind young lady from yesterday." His voice was clearer today, almost scholarly. "I hope you're well?" Jasmine shifted her weight from one foot to the other. I was wondering about your phone. Why do you look at it every day?" A sad smile crossed his weathered face. "Because it's all I have left of them." He held out the phone, its screen a web of cracks. "Would you like to see?" Jasmine glanced at her watch. She was already running late, but okay. She stepped closer, keeping a careful distance. The man angled the phone so she could see through the cracks. Behind the shattered glass, a photo was still visible, a smiling black family. The man himself looking years younger, standing with a woman and 2 teenage girls in front of a neat brick house. "That's my family," he said softly. "In Detroit." Before everything, his voice cracked, and Jasmine found herself sitting on the far end of the bench. "What happened?" "Cancer happened. My wife's treatments." He shook his head. "Insurance wouldn't cover all of it. I took out loans, mortgaged the house, worked 3 jobs. But it wasn't enough. When she passed, I lost everything trying to pay the bills. My daughters—" He touched the screen gently. "They tried to help, But they have their own families now. I couldn't be a burden, so you left? Jasmine couldn't keep the edge out of her voice, thinking of her own father. No, no. He looked at her sharply. I told them I was staying with friends while I got back on my feet. They don't know. He gestured to his ragged clothes. I call sometimes from the shelter phone. Tell them I'm still looking for work. But now this is broken, and their numbers... He tapped the phone. All gone. Jasmine's own phone felt heavy in her pocket. When did you break it? Last week. Some kids were harassing an old woman, trying to take her purse. I intervened, and... He shrugged. In the scuffle, it fell. The kids ran off. The woman was safe, but my last connection... His hands trembled. I'm Jasmine, she said suddenly. He smiled, a real smile this time. Richard Thompson. Former high school physics teacher. Current. He gestured to the bench. Street furniture. The school bell rang in the distance. Jasmine jumped up. I'm late. Go, go, Richard said. Education is important. More important than listening to an old man's troubles. Jasmine hesitated. Oh, I'll come back after school. I'd like that, Jasmine. But only if your parents approve. I wouldn't want you to get in trouble. She thought of her mother, working her double shift today. Of the eviction notice. Of her father walking away. It's just my mom. And she's working. Richard nodded, understanding in his eyes. After school, then? If you're sure. Jasmine ran all the way to school, arriving halfway through first period. Her teacher marked her tardy but didn't comment. Probably noticed her breathing hard from running. During lunch, she sat with Angela in their usual corner of the library. You're being weird today, Angela said, splitting her sandwich in half and sliding a portion over. Weirder than usual. Jasmine took the sandwich with a grateful nod. We got an eviction notice. Shit. Angela lowered her voice at the librarian's glare. Sorry, but shit. What are you going to do? Mom's trying to figure it out. But Jasmine told her about Richard, the broken phone, his family in Detroit. Angela frowned. Girl, you can't be talking to homeless men. That's not safe. He's different. He's like a teacher. Used to be one. Actually, and you believe that. You haven't seen him, Angela. The way he talks, how he holds himself. That picture in his phone could be anybody's picture. Angela's voice was gentle. Look, I know you miss your dad, Dash. This isn't about him. Jasmine's outburst earned another glare from the librarian. She lowered her voice. Richard didn't abandon his family. He's protecting them. There's a difference. Okay. Angela held up her hands. Just be careful, all right? Want me to come with you after school? Jasmine shook her head. Got work, but thanks. The rest of the day dragged. During her library shift, Jasmine researched homeless services on the computer when Mrs. Peterson wasn't looking. Most required ID, proof of residence, things Richard probably didn't have anymore. At 5:30, she gathered her things. Mrs. Peterson, is it okay if I use my phone to take a picture of something from this book? For my history project? The librarian nodded absently, focused on her computer. Jasmine's heart pounded as she left the school. What if Richard was gone? What if Angela was right, and this was all a big mistake? But he was there, sitting straight-backed on his bench despite the evening chill. You came back, he said, sounding surprised. I said I would. Jasmine sat down, leaving the same careful space between them. Can I try something with your phone? Richard handed it over slowly. Jasmine held her breath as she pressed the power button. The screen flickered weakly. It still works? Richard leaned forward. Sometimes phones will still work even with a broken screen. Jasmine remembered Angela's brother fixing phones for extra cash. Can you unlock it? Richard's fingers shook as he input the code. The shattered screen made it hard to see, but the photo was still there. Jasmine quickly took several pictures with her own phone, making sure to get clear shots of the family. There, she said, showing him. Now you have a backup. And maybe we could try to find them? Your daughters? No. Richard's voice was firm. They can't see me like this. I won't burden them. But Dash, Jasmine. He looked at her seriously. Promise me you won't try to contact them. Please. She wanted to argue, but his eyes were pleading. Okay, I promise. A gust of wind made them both shiver. Richard glanced at the darkening sky. You should get home. Your mother will worry. Jasmine thought of their empty apartment, Her mom wouldn't be home for hours yet. Yeah. She stood up, then remembered something. Digging in her backpack, she pulled out half of today's sandwich from Angela. Here, in case you're hungry later. Richard's eyes welled up. You're a good person, Jasmine. Like my Sarah used to be. Always helping others even when we barely had enough ourselves. Was that your wife's name? Sarah? He nodded, carefully wrapping the sandwich in his handkerchief. Sarah Thompson. The girls are Michelle and Lisa. Michelle's the older one. She's a nurse now. Lisa teaches elementary school. Pride filled his voice. Just like their parents, Jasmine said softly. Richard smiled, but it was pained. Go home, Jasmine. Be safe. She walked away slowly, her phone feeling heavier in her pocket with the weight of the family photos. She had promised not to contact them, but promises could be broken. Sometimes they had to be. The apartment was dark and empty when she got home. Jasmine sat on their bed, looking at the photos she'd taken. Richard's family looked so happy, so normal. How did someone go from that to sleeping on a bench? She thought about the eviction notice. 30 days. In 30 days, would she and her mom? No, she wouldn't let that happen. And maybe, just maybe, by helping Richard, she could stop it from happening to them too. Her phone lit up with a text from her mother. Working late again, baby. Leftover pasta in fridge. Love you. Jasmine looked at the eviction notice, then back at the photos of Richard's family. She had to do something. But what? Outside, the city grew darker. And somewhere out there, a former physics teacher was sleeping on a bench, dreaming of a home he'd lost and a family he'd left behind to protect. Just like tomorrow, he'd wake up and stare at a broken phone, holding on to memories behind shattered glass. Jasmine opened her social media app. She had 47 followers, mostly classmates. Not much, but it was a start. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she thought about what to write. Sometimes, she typed slowly. Help comes from unexpected places. And sometimes, the people who need help the most are the ones who never ask for it. Jasmine woke up to her phone buzzing. Not her alarm, notifications. Her heart jumped as she opened the social media app, then sank just as quickly. 3 likes on her post about Richard. 2 from classmates, 1 from Angela. What did you expect? She muttered to herself, careful not to wake her mother. Some kind of miracle? The morning routine felt heavier today. Her mother had come home late again, makeup smeared from exhaustion. They could barely keep up with regular rent. How were they supposed to find a new place in 30 days? Outside, the air was thick with early morning fog. Jasmine clutched her phone, the family photos she'd taken of Richard's broken screen safely stored in her gallery. She'd stayed up late studying them, looking for clues, street signs in the background, anything that might help locate his family in Detroit. Richard was already at his bench, but something was wrong. His usual dignified posture was crumpled, his face buried in his hands. Mr. Thompson? Jasmine approached cautiously. Are you okay? He looked up, eyes red and swollen. Jasmine. No, I'm afraid I'm not. The shelter, they're full. Have been for 3 days now. You been out here? All night. The temperature had dropped into the 40s. Richard straightened his shoulders, trying to regain his composure. I've managed. But he held up his broken phone. The screen was completely dark now. I think it's finally given up. Jasmine sat down, no longer bothering with the careful distance. Tell me about Detroit. About your family. Maybe if we dash. I told you no. His voice was sharp. Then softer. I'm sorry. But they can't know. I won't have them seeing me like this. But they're your family. They want to dash, Jasmine. Richard turned to face her fully. Do you know what it does to a father to have his children see him fail? To have them worry about whether he's eating, where he's sleeping? He shook his head. I was supposed to protect them, provide for them, not become a burden. That's not fair, Jasmine protested. To them or to you? A bitter laugh escaped him. Life rarely is, my dear. The school bell rang in the distance. Jasmine ignored it. At least let me post about you online. Maybe someone dash, and have my story become some viral poverty porn? Richard's academic tone sharpened. Have strangers debating my choices, judging my failures? No, thank you. But dash, go to school, Jasmine. Focus on your own life, your own family. She stood up slowly. I'll bring you a blanket. After school, Jasmine dash a blanket, she repeated firmly. That's not helping. That's just being human. In class, Jasmine could barely focus. She pulled out her phone during history, hiding it under her desk as she typed out a new post. Everyone has a story. Today, I met a former physics teacher who lost everything paying for his wife's cancer treatments. Now he sleeps on a bench, too proud to tell his daughters he's homeless. He says he doesn't want help, but it's getting cold. She added one of the photos she'd taken. The clearest shot of Richard's family photo, their smiling faces visible despite the phone's cracked screen. Delete that right now. Jasmine jumped. Angela was leaning over her shoulder, frowning. Why? Because, Angela whispered, no one's going to believe some random black girl posting about a homeless man. They'll think you're running a scam. But it's true. Truth doesn't matter on social media. You know that? The teacher cleared his throat. Both girls straightened in their seats. During lunch, Jasmine checked her new post. A few comments had appeared. Yeah, right, a little nice try. Another scammer trying to get $. Pics probably stolen. She deleted the post, hands shaking with anger. Told you, Angela said gently, sliding over her usual half sandwich. People suck. We have to help them on. He's sleeping on that bench now. And it's getting colder. And what about you? Your mom? The eviction? Jasmine stared at her sandwich. Maybe if I help him, someone will help us too. Angela sighed. Girl, that's not how the world works. Then maybe it should be. After school, Jasmine headed straight to the library. Not their school library. The public one, with better computers. She plugged Richard's family's names into every search engine she could think of. Sarah Thompson, Detroit, cancer. Too many results. Michelle Thompson, nurse, Detroit, even more. Lisa Thompson, teacher, Detroit. Impossible to narrow down. She tried image searches next, uploading the family photo. Nothing. Can I help you find something? Jasmine minimized the browser quickly. A librarian, not one she knew, was watching her with suspicious eyes. No, thank you. Just research for school. The librarian lingered, looking at Jasmine's worn uniform, her faded braids. Reference section closes in 10 minutes. Okay, thank you. On her way home, Jasmine stopped at Goodwill. The blanket she found was thin, a faded blue, but only $3. She had $4 left from her library aid pay. Richard wasn't on his bench. Panic seized her throat. She looked around wildly, checking nearby doorways, alleys. Do you want to try the shelter again? The voice came from a woman huddled in a doorway across the street. She had a shopping cart full of bottles beside her. When? Did he say if dash? About an hour ago. Said something about calling his girls before it got dark. Jasmine's chest tightened. The shelter had a phone. If he reached his daughters, she ran. The shelter was 6 blocks away. By the time she got there, her lungs were burning. A line of people stretched around the building. Richard, she moved along the line, ignoring annoyed looks. Mr. Thompson? Young lady. A security guard stepped forward. You can't be here. I'm looking for someone. Richard Thompson. Former teacher. He dash. No minors allowed unless accompanied by a parent or guardian. The guard's tone softened slightly. For your own safety. Okay. Jasmine clutched the blanket. Can you at least look for him? Tell him Jasmine brought. I'll pass it along if I see him. The guard took the blanket. Now go home. It's getting dark. The walk home felt endless. Jasmine's phone was nearly dead. She hadn't been able to charge it at school today. As if sensing its last moments, it buzzed. A text from her mother. Where are you? It's late. Before she could reply, the screen went black. The apartment was dark when she arrived, but not empty. Where have you been? Her mother's voice was tight with worry and something else. Anger? I was studying. At the library. My phone died. Don't lie to me. Her mother flicked on the light. She was still in her diner uniform, makeup streaked with tears. Mrs. Peterson called. Said you've been acting strange. Researching homeless services? Taking pictures of library books? Jasmine's stomach dropped. Mom dash, and then her mother held up her own phone. On the screen was Jasmine's deleted post about Richard. Someone had screenshotted it. Care to explain this? He needs help, Mom. His wife died, and he lost everything. And now he's sleeping on a bench. Stop. Her mother's voice cracked. Just stop. We're about to lose our home, Jasmine. We can barely feed ourselves. And you're out there, talking to strange men, posting our business online. I didn't post anything about us. You think people can't figure it out? You think they can't see? Her mother gestured at their tiny apartment, the eviction notice still on the counter. We're one step away from where he is, baby. One step. I can't have you. She broke down, shoulders shaking. Jasmine moved to hug her, but her mother stepped back. No more. You hear me? No more talking to him. No more posts. No more pictures. You go to school, you come home. That's it. Mom, please promise me, Jasmine. Promise me right now. Jasmine thought of Richard, somewhere out in the cold, of his daughters in Detroit, not knowing their father was sleeping on streets. A promise is made and broken. I promise, she whispered. Her mother pulled her into a fierce hug. I can't lose you too, she murmured into Jasmine's hair. I can't. Later, lying in their shared bed, Jasmine stared at the water stains on the ceiling. Her mother's breathing had finally evened out in sleep. Carefully, silently, she pulled out her now-charged phone. Opened the family photo again. I'm sorry, she typed into a new post. But sometimes promises have to be broken. She added the photo, her fingers hovering over post. A noise outside made her jump. Footsteps on the fire escape. Her heart pounded as a shadow passed their window. The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor. Her mother stirred. Baby? What was that? Before Jasmine could answer, there was a crash of breaking glass. Glass crunched under Jasmine's feet as she scrambled to find her phone in the dark. Her mother was already up, grabbing the baseball bat they kept by the bed. Stay behind me, her mother whispered, moving toward the window. A cold breeze swept through the broken pane. Outside, footsteps clattered down the fire escape, fading into the night. My phone, Jasmine's voice cracked. They took my phone? Her mother flicked on the lights, surveying the damage. A brick lay among the shattered glass, wrapped in paper with crude writing. Mind your own business. Call the police, her mother said, then saw Jasmine's face. Baby, what aren't you telling me? Jasmine sank to the floor, careful to avoid the glass. The photos? Richard's family. They were all on my phone. Oh, baby. Her mother sat beside her, bat across her lap. I'm calling them anyway. We need a police report for the landlord. But Jasmine barely heard the call, her mother's calm voice giving their address, describing the break-in. All she could think about was Richard's family photos gone. Their last connection to his past life vanished into the night with her stolen phone. The police came, took statements, swept glass into piles. Probably local kids, they said. We'll keep an eye out for your phone, but their shrug said everything. Dawn was breaking by the time they left. Jasmine's mother called both her jobs, explaining she'd be late. Go to school, she told Jasmine. I'll deal with the window. But go. We can't both miss work and school. Just be careful, okay? Jasmine nodded numbly. She changed in her uniform, gathered her books, and headed out. The morning felt wrong without her phone's familiar weight in her pocket. Richard's bench was empty. She stopped dead, staring at the vacant spot where he always sat. His cardboard mat was gone, the space eerily clean like he'd never been there at all. No. Jasmine spun in a circle, searching nearby doorways. Richard? Mr. Thompson? Nothing. She ran to the shelter, ignoring the stitch in her side. The morning line was already forming, but Richard wasn't in it. Hey! She caught the arm of a man leaving. The teacher, Richard Thompson. Have you seen him? The man pulled away. Lady collapsed last night. Ambulance came. Took some old guy with him, too. Which hospital? Jasmine's voice rose. Please. County probably. They always take him to county. County General was 15 blocks in the opposite direction from school. Jasmine looked at her watch, then started running again. The emergency room was packed. Jasmine approached the desk, trying to catch her breath. I'm looking for Richard Thompson. He would have come in last night. Are you families? The nurse didn't look up from her computer. No. But then I can't help you. HIPAA regulations. Next. Please. Jasmine leaned over the desk. He's homeless. He might have collapsed. I just need to know if he's okay. The nurse finally looked at her, eyes softening slightly. Honey, I really can't tell you anything. Even if someone matching that description came in without family authorization, but his family doesn't know he's homeless. They're in Detroit, and my phone was stolen with their picture. And listen, the nurse lowered her voice. I don't know about any Richard Thompson, but if I did, I might suggest checking the free clinic on 47th. They're good with homeless patients. Sometimes transfer them there from here. Understand? Jasmine nodded quickly. Thank you. I didn't tell you anything, the nurse said louder. Next. The free clinic was another 10 blocks. By now, first period was long over. Jasmine's legs burned as she ran, dodging morning commuters on crowded sidewalks. A bell chimed as she pushed through the clinic's door. The waiting room was small, just a few plastic chairs and outdated magazines. Richard Thompson? She asked the receptionist. Please, I just need to know if he's here. The receptionist, an elderly woman with kind eyes, shook her head. No one by that name. But if you leave your number she stopped, seeing Jasmine's face. Oh, no phone? It was stolen. Last night, with his family's pictures, and now I can't find him. And Jasmine's voice broke. Sit down before you fall down, the receptionist said firmly. Let me make some calls. Jasmine sank into a plastic chair, her school uniform wrinkled and damp with sweat. On the wall, a clock ticked loudly. 9:45 a.m. Second period would be starting. The receptionist's voice drifted over. Yes, male, African-American, mid-60s, former teacher. Homeless. No. Okay, thanks anyway. More calls. More head shakes. Finally, well, good news and bad news, the receptionist said. He was at county last night. Dehydration and exposure. They stabilized him and transferred him to St. Luke's. That's across town. Free bed opened up in their charity ward. He's getting good care, the receptionist assured her. But honey, they still won't be able to tell you anything. Not without family consent. Jasmine stood up. Thank you. Really? Wait. The receptionist scribbled on a notepad. Take my number. In case you need it. Outside, Jasmine squinted at the morning sun. St. Luke's was at least an hour away by foot. Her mother's words echoed. Go to school. Be careful. But Richard was alone in a hospital bed, maybe dying, with no way to contact his family. And it was her fault. If she hadn't posted those photos, hadn't drawn attention. A bus rumbled past. St. Luke's Medical Center, scrolling across its destination board like a sign. Jasmine ran for it, fishing loose change from her skirt pocket. Just enough for a one-way fare. The hospital lobby was all gleaming floors and hushed voices. A different kind of desk, a different kind of rejection. I'm sorry, but without family authorization, please, I just need 5 minutes. Security can escort you out, or you can leave on your own. Your choice. Back on the street, Jasmine paced. She had no phone to call Angela for help. No money left for bus fare home. And somewhere in this massive building, Richard was lying in a hospital bed, alone. A side door opened. A nurse stepped out for a cigarette break, propping the door with her foot. Jasmine's heart pounded. It was stupid. Dangerous. If she got caught. She walked past the nurse casually, then slipped through the door before it could close. The charity ward was on the 4th floor, according to directories on the wall. Jasmine took the stairs, not risking the elevator. Her legs trembled from all the running earlier. Floor 4. A sign pointed left. Charity ward. She walked quickly, confidently, like she belonged. Past the nurse's station, where everyone was focused on charts and computers. Past rooms filled with beeping machines. Then she heard it. A familiar voice, hoarse but still carrying that professor's tone. Need to contact my daughters. Please. The numbers were in my phone. Jasmine peered around the doorframe. Richard lay in a narrow bed, oxygen tubes in his nose, hospital gown making him look smaller somehow. But his eyes were open, alert. Mr. Thompson? He turned. Jasmine? What do you know? You shouldn't be here. I had to make sure you were okay. But listen, my phone was stolen. The photos of your family young lady. A sharp voice behind her. This area is restricted. Security. 2 guards approaching fast. I'm sorry. Jasmine backed away. I just dash, it's fine, Richard called. She's not bothering me. But the guards each took one of her arms, firmly steering her toward the elevator. Please. Jasmine twisted to look back. I'll find them, Mr. Thompson. I promise. The elevator doors closed on Richard's worried face. They escorted her all the way out, took her name, warned her not to return without authorization. The nurse who'd propped the door got written up. Jasmine stood on the sidewalk, empty-handed and alone. No phone, no photos, no way to help. She started walking. What else could she do? 2 hours later, she finally reached her school. Lunch period was just ending. Girl, where have you been? Angela grabbed her arm. Your mom called my mom, called the school. Everybody's looking for you. I had to find him, Jasmine said numbly. He collapsed. He's in the hospital. Who's in the— oh no. No, tell me you didn't. But the rest of Angela's words faded as Jasmine saw the poster on the cafeteria wall. Her own face stared back at her, above the words. Have you seen this student? Her mother was going to kill her. And somewhere across town, a former physics teacher lay in a charity ward bed, his only connection to his past life shattered like the window of a third-floor apartment, scattered like broken promises in the early morning dark. The principal's office was cold. Jasmine sat between her mother and Mrs. Peterson from the library, staring at her hands folded in her lap. Cutting classes, unauthorized computer use, running away. Principal Martinez read from a file. This isn't like you, Jasmine. I wasn't running away, Jasmine said quietly. I was trying to help by chasing after homeless men, breaking into hospitals. Her mother's voice cracked. You could have been hurt, or worse. Mrs. Peterson cleared her throat. If I may, Jasmine has been one of our most reliable student aides. Whatever's going on, I'm sure she had good intentions. Intentions don't matter when my daughter is putting herself in danger. Her mother stood up. First a break-in, now this. Principal Martinez leaned forward. Break-in? Someone threw a brick through our window last night. Stole her phone, and you didn't think to mention this earlier? The principal reached for his phone. We need to file a report, Dash already did. With the police. Her mother's voice was tired. Look, just what happens now? 2 days suspension, Principal Martinez said. And she'll need to make up all missed work. I can help with that, Mrs. Peterson offered. She can use the library computers after hours to catch up. The principal nodded. But Jasmine, no more unauthorized absences. Understand? Yes, sir. Outside the office, her mother gripped her arm. Home. Now. Mom, I have to tell you something first. About Richard Dash, no. Her mother's fingers tightened. No more about him. You're done with all that. He's in the hospital. He needs Dash. We need to not be homeless in 27 days. Her mother's voice rose, drawing stares from passing students. She lowered it. We need to focus on us right now. Only us. The walk home was silent. Inside their apartment, someone had taped garbage bags over the broken window. The brick was gone, but glass still crunched underfoot despite their best cleaning efforts. Sit. Her mother pointed to their bed. We need to talk. Jasmine sat. Her mother paced the small space. I know you want to help people. That's beautiful. You got that from your grandmother. She stopped pacing. But baby, we can barely help ourselves right now. Maybe if we help him, someone will Dash. Life doesn't work that way. Her mother sat heavily beside her. No one's coming to save us. No one helped me when your father left. No one helped when I lost my teaching job. We survive because we have to. Because we're all we've got. Jasmine stared at the garbage bags fluttering over broken glass. You were a teacher? Her mother was quiet for a long moment. 2nd grade. Before the budget cuts. Before. She shook her head. That's not the point. The point is Dash. Richard was a teacher too. Physics. Jasmine turned to her mother. He lost everything paying for his wife's cancer treatments. His daughters don't even know he's homeless. And now he's alone in a hospital, and I promised I'd help, and Dash, stop. But her mother's voice was softer. Just stop. They sat in silence, garbage bags rustling in the draft. Finally, her mother spoke. Tell me everything. From the beginning. So Jasmine did. About the broken phone, the family photo, the nights on the bench. About the hospital and the charity ward. With each word, Her mother's face grew more troubled. Detroit, you said? She stood up suddenly, went to their small closet, dug through a box. Here, she handed Jasmine a wrinkled business card. Detroit Public Schools, Human Resources. You kept this? From when you were looking? Her mother nodded. Called them about openings last year. Nice woman named Janet. She took a deep breath. She might be able to help find records. If this Richard Thompson really taught there. Jasmine launched herself at her mother, hugging her tight. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This doesn't mean I approve, her mother said firmly. But if he really is who he says, no one should be alone in a hospital. They used her mother's phone to call the number. After 3 transfers and a long hold, Janet Mitchell speaking. Hi, I'm looking for information about a former teacher. Richard Thompson? He would have taught physics. I can't give out personnel information without proper authorization. Please, Jasmine's voice cracked. He's in the hospital. His family doesn't know. He just wants to talk to his daughters. A pause. What did you say his name was again? Richard Thompson. He taught physics. His wife was Sarah. She died of cancer. His daughters are Michelle and Lisa. Hold, please. More waiting. Jasmine's hand hurt from gripping the phone. Are you still there? Janet's voice was different now. I remember Mr. Thompson. Good teacher. Won awards. Then he just disappeared. About 2 years ago. Yes, that's him. Do you have any contact information for his family? I really shouldn't. Janet sighed. But if he's in the hospital, let me see what I can find. 10 minutes later, they had an address in Detroit and a possible phone number for Michelle Thompson Davis, RN. Remember, Janet said, I didn't give you this. And please, let us know if he's okay. He was one of the good ones. Jasmine's hands shook as she wrote down the information. Now we just have to dash, wait. Her mother took the paper. We do this carefully. No more running off. No more putting yourself in danger. But dash, I'll call. A parent is more likely to be taken seriously. She looked at her watch. After my shift. Speaking of which, you don't have to miss more work. I'll be okay. Her mother cupped her face. You sure? After everything, I'll stay home. Do my makeup work. No computer except for school stuff. Promise. Okay. Her mother kissed her forehead. We'll figure this out. Together. After her mother left, Jasmine spread her school books on their small table. But the numbers and words blurred together. Somewhere in Detroit, a nurse named Michelle had no idea her father was lying in a charity ward bed. Somewhere in this city, people were still sharing that screenshot of Jasmine's deleted post, calling her a scammer, a liar. The garbage bags rustled. Glass crunched under her feet as she got up to make tea. Her mother's words echoed. No one's coming to save us. But maybe, just maybe, they could help save someone else. The ancient kettle whistled. As Jasmine poured hot water over a reused tea bag, a text chimed on her mother's old backup phone she'd left for emergencies. Unknown number. Tell your mom check her email. Job opening at medical billing office. Good pay, benefits. Reference. Michelle T.D., St. Mary's, Detroit. Jasmine nearly dropped the cup. Another text. I believe you about my father. We need to talk. Outside, sirens wailed. The garbage bags fluttered. And somewhere between Chicago and Detroit, a fragile thread of hope stretched like a lifeline through the gathering dark. The emergency room's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Jasmine and her mother rushed through the sliding doors. The text had come during her mother's shift. Richard had taken a turn for the worse. I'm looking for Richard Thompson, her mother said at the desk, voice carrying the authority Jasmine had failed to convey on her last visit. We have family consent. The nurse looked skeptical. And you are? I have his daughter on the phone. Her mother held up her cell. Michelle Thompson Davis from St. Mary's, Detroit. A tinny voice came through the speaker. This is Michelle Davis, RN. I'm authorizing information release about my father to Ms. Williams and her daughter. The nurse's demeanor changed instantly. Room 412. They just moved him from ICU. The elevator ride felt endless. Jasmine's hands wouldn't stop shaking. What if we're too late? She whispered. Her mother squeezed her shoulder. We're not. Room 412 was dimly lit. Richard lay still, oxygen mask covering most of his face, monitors beeping steadily. He looked smaller somehow, lost in the hospital gown and white sheets. Daddy. The voice from the phone was clearer now, on speaker. Richard's eyes fluttered open. Shell? His voice was muffled by the mask. That you, baby? Yeah, Daddy. It's me. Miss Shell's voice cracked. Why didn't you tell us? All those calls saying you were fine. Staying with friends? Couldn't burden you. Burden us? You're our father. Richard tried to sit up, but the effort left him gasping. A monitor beeped more rapidly. Sir, please stay still. Jasmine's mother stepped forward. Michelle, maybe we should dash now. Richard pulled the mask down. Need to explain your mother's treatments, the bills. We knew about the bills, Daddy. We tried to help, but you kept saying everything was under control. My job. To protect you. His breathing grew labored. Jasmine's mother replaced the oxygen mask firmly. That's enough for now. He needs rest. Jasmine, Richard's eyes found her. I'm sorry about your phone. Don't worry about that. Jasmine moved closer. Just get better. The door opened. A doctor entered, frowning at the crowd. Mr. Thompson needs to rest. In visiting hours or dash, his daughter's on the phone, Jasmine's mother explained. From Detroit, the doctor's frown deepened. Then she should know his condition is serious. The exposure combined with underlying health issues. He needs proper care. Long-term care. Can he be transferred? Michelle asked through the phone. To a facility here in Detroit? With proper insurance authorization dash, he'll have insurance. I'll make sure of it. Michelle's voice was firm. Just tell me what you need. The doctor looked relieved. I'll have social services bring the paperwork. After he left, Richard pulled the mask down again. Michelle, no. The cost dash, Papa, stop. Another voice joined Michelle's, Lisa, the younger daughter. Let us help, please. Richard's eyes filled with tears. The monitor's beeping increased again. Sir, the mask needs to stay on, Jasmine's mother said gently. Girls, maybe we should let him rest. We can call back Dash now? Richard grabbed her arm with surprising strength. Need them to know. Proud of them. Never wanted to disappear. We know, Daddy. Michelle's voice was thick with tears. We know. Love you both so much. The monitor's beeping turned urgent. Richard's hand went slack. Daddy? Daddy? Jasmine's mother hit the call button as doctors rushed in. They were quickly ushered out into the hallway, Michelle and Lisa's voices still calling from the phone. What's happening? Jasmine pressed against the window, watching the medical team work. Mom? I don't know, baby. Her mother held the phone tight. Michelle? Still there? Please, Michelle's voice shook. Please don't let him die alone. Not like this. An eternity passed in that hallway. Jasmine thought about broken phones and broken windows, about fathers who left and fathers who try to protect their children the wrong way. Finally, the doctor emerged. He's stabilized, but he needs to be monitored closely. The collective exhale was audible even through the phone. When can we transfer him? Lisa asked. Let's discuss options tomorrow. For now, he needs complete rest. No more excitement. They were allowed one last look through the window. Richard slept, oxygen mask firmly in place, but his face seemed more peaceful somehow. Outside the hospital, the night air was cold. Jasmine hugged herself, remembering Richard on his bench in the dropping temperatures. Thank you, Michelle said through the phone. Both of you, for finding him, for caring. Jasmine did all the work, her mother said quietly. I just helped at the end. Still, not everyone would get involved, especially after. Is it true someone broke your window? Threatened you? Jasmine's mother stiffened. How did you dash? I saw the social media posts. The comments. People calling my father's story a scam. Michelle's voice hardened. That's part of why I didn't believe it at first. But then I looked closer. Saw how that young girl kept trying, kept defending him. Even when people were cruel. That's my daughter, her mother said simply. Listen, Michelle paused. That job I mentioned, it's real. Good salary, full benefits. We need someone in billing who actually cares about people. Someone who understands. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Please. Let us help you the way you helped our father. Jasmine watched her mother's face in the harsh hospital lights. Saw the hope warring with pride, with fear. I'll need time to think, her mother said finally. To figure out logistics. Of course. The position's yours whenever you're ready. A pause. Oh. And Jasmine? Yes. There's a summer science program here. For high school students. Full scholarship. If you're interested. Jasmine's heart jumped. Really? Really? Seems fitting, doesn't it? A physics teacher's daughter helping the girl who helped him. Later, on the bus home, Jasmine leaned against her mother's shoulder. I'm sorry I scared you. With everything. I know, baby. Her mother kissed her head. I'm sorry, too, for not listening sooner. Do you think he'll be okay? I think. Her mother looked out the dark window. I think sometimes people need to be reminded they're not alone, that it's okay to let others help. Jasmine thought of Richard's face when he heard his daughter's voices, of her mother's when Michelle mentioned the job. The bus passed Richard's empty bench. Someone had left flowers there. Mom, I think we should take the job. Go to Detroit. Her mother was quiet for a long moment. You'd leave your school? Your friends? Angela can visit. And maybe. Jasmine hesitated. Maybe it's time for a fresh start. For both of us. The bus turned onto their street. The broken window was a dark square above the bodega. Besides, Jasmine added softly, Richard's going to need someone checking on him, making sure he doesn't try to protect his daughters from helping again. Her mother laughed, a real laugh for the first time in days. You don't give up, do you? Nope. Jasmine grinned. I get that from my mom. They walked up the dark stairs to their apartment. The eviction notice still hung on the door, but somehow it didn't seem as scary anymore. Her mother paused with the key in the lock. You really want to do this? Detroit. Jasmine thought about the summer program, about Richard teaching physics, passing his love of science to others, about second chances and new beginnings. Yeah, she said. I really do. Inside, her mother pulled out her phone, staring at Michelle's number. Together? Jasmine asked. Her mother nodded, hitting dial. Together? Are you sure this looks okay? Jasmine adjusted her collar for the 100th time, staring at her reflection in the library computer screen. The video call with Richard's daughters was scheduled to start in 5 minutes. You look fine, Angela said, straightening a borrowed blazer on Jasmine's shoulders. Stop fidgeting. The library was closed, but Mrs. Peterson had let them use the computer lab for this call. Jasmine's mother stood behind them, her own borrowed dress smooth and professional. Remember, her mother said quietly, let them ask their questions. Don't push. Jasmine nodded, her throat tight. After a week of text messages and brief calls, Michelle and Lisa wanted to see them face to face. To hear the whole story, the computer chimed. Video call incoming. Jasmine clicked accept with trembling fingers. The screen split into 2 windows, Michelle in blue hospital scrubs, Lisa in a classroom after hours. Hi, Jasmine managed. So you're our father's guardian angel. Michelle leaned closer to her camera. You look so young. I'm 14. Jasmine felt her mother's hand on her shoulder. This is my mom, Ms. Williams. Thank you both for meeting like this, Lisa said. We need to understand everything. From the beginning. So Jasmine told them. About seeing Richard every morning, his dignity despite his circumstances. The broken phone with their photo. His refusal to reach out. He kept saying he didn't want to burden us, Jasmine explained. That it was his job to protect you. Protect us? Lisa's voice cracked. He was sleeping on a bench. The bills were overwhelming, Michelle said quietly. After Mom died, I tried to help with the medical debt, but he kept saying he had it under control. Then one day, his phone was disconnected. His house was empty. He left a note, Lisa added. Don't worry about me. I'm staying with friends until things settle. We tried to find him, but he was ashamed. Jasmine's mother spoke up. Sometimes parents would rather disappear than let their children see them fail. Something passed between the sisters, faces, understanding, pain. The hospital said he's stable enough to transfer, Michelle said. We found a good facility here in Detroit. Private room, physical therapy. He'll fight it, Jasmine warned. He still thinks he's protecting you by staying away. Let him try. Lisa's teacher voice came through. We're not losing him again. A knock at the library door made them all jump. Mrs. Peterson poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but you have a visitor. She stepped aside. Richard rolled in a wheelchair, a nurse behind him. Daddy, Both sisters exclaimed. My girls. Richard's voice was stronger, but his hands shook as he gripped the wheelchair arms. I don't deserve. Stop. Michelle's tone was firm. No more of that. You're coming home? The cost dash is covered, Lisa interrupted. We're both working, Daddy. Good jobs, like you always wanted for us. Let us help. Richard's eyes filled with tears. I failed you. Failed your mother. No. Michelle leaned so close to her camera her face filled the screen. Mom's bills? That wasn't failure. That was love. You gave everything to try to save her. But now it's our turn to give back. I'm supposed to take care of you, Richard insisted. Not the other way around. And who says it can't go both ways? Lisa asked. You taught us about reciprocals in math, remember? How they work together, balanced? A surprised laugh escaped Richard. Using physics against me? Using everything we learned from you, Michelle said, including stubbornness. Jasmine watched Richard's face, saw the moment his resistance cracked. I've missed you both, he whispered. So much. We've missed you too, Daddy. Both sisters were crying now. So much. The nurse stepped forward. 5 more minutes. He needs his rest. Richard turned to Jasmine and her mother. I can never repay what you've done. Just get better, Jasmine said. That's all we want. Actually, her mother straightened. About that job offer, Michelle? Still open, Michelle said quickly. The apartment 2. 2 bedrooms, good neighborhood. Near the science center where the summer program is held. Richard's head snapped up. Summer program? Physics, Jasmine said shyly. If that's okay. Okay. Richard beamed. My guardian angel studying physics? It's perfect. The nurse cleared her throat. Time to go, Mr. Thompson. Wait. Richard gripped the wheelchair. Michelle, Lisa, I need you to know. Every day on that bench, looking at your picture, you kept me going, kept me trying to find a way back. And now we've found you, Lisa said firmly. No more disappearing. No more. Richard agreed softly. I promise. After they ended the call, after the nurse wheeled Richard back to his room, Jasmine slumped in her chair. You okay, baby? Her mother rubbed her shoulders. Yeah, it's really happening, isn't it? Detroit. Cold feet. Jasmine shook her head. No, just big changes. Angela, who'd been quiet throughout the call, suddenly hugged her tight. You better FaceTime me every day, she demanded. And I'm visiting for spring break. Promise. Jasmine hugged back. Thank you for the blazer. And everything else? Mrs. Peterson approached with a tissue box. They all needed it. The library won't be the same without you, she said. But this is something special. What you've done. What you're doing. It wasn't just me, Jasmine protested. Everyone helped. You, Angela, Mom? But it started with you, her mother said. With one girl who kept stopping to help when everyone else walked by. Outside, the spring evening was warm. They could see Richard's bench from the library steps. The flowers still fresh. A small sign propped against it. Get well soon, Mr. Thompson. From your friends at the shelter. When do we leave? Jasmine asked. Her mother looked at the phone in her hand. Michelle's job offer glowing on the screen. Hospital's transferring him next week. Maybe we go then too? Fresh, start together. Jasmine nodded. 1 week to pack up their small apartment. 1 week to say goodbye to Chicago. 1 week until... What are you thinking? Her mother asked. Jasmine watched the sunset paint the city gold. About reciprocals. How sometimes helping others means letting them help you too. Her mother smiled. Your physics teacher would be proud of that one. Speaking of... Jasmine grinned. Think Richard will help me with my summer program homework? Baby, I think Richard would build you a whole laboratory if he could. They walked home arm in arm, the evening wrapping around them like a promise. Behind them, the library lights glowed warm against the gathering dark. Tomorrow, they'd start packing, start planning, start saying goodbyes. But tonight, in a hospital room across town, a father was finally letting himself be cared for by his daughters. And in a small apartment above a bodega, a mother and daughter were learning that sometimes the biggest gifts come disguised as broken things. Phones, windows, lives that needed mending. Sometimes all it took was one person willing to stop and help put the pieces back together. The cardboard box wasn't very big, but it held everything Jasmine owned. 14 years of life packed into one container from the grocery store down the street. She labeled it carefully. Jasmine's room. Room? The word felt strange. In Detroit, she'd have her own bedroom. No more sharing a twin bed. No more changing clothes in a bathroom smaller than most closets. Baby, her mother called from the hallway. The moving truck's here? Not a real moving truck, just a van borrowed from their neighbor, Mr. Rodriguez. He'd offered as soon as he heard they were leaving. Coming. Their apartment looked bizarre, half empty. The bed was staying. It came with the place. Most of their furniture was too old or broken to be worth taking. Sure you got everything? Her mother stood in the doorway, keys in hand. Jasmine did one last sweep. The garbage bags were gone from the window. The landlord had finally fixed it yesterday. The eviction notice was gone too, torn up and thrown away once they'd given their notice. Yeah, she said. I'm ready. Downstairs, Angela waited with the van. Last box. Jasmine nodded. They'd spent yesterday packing, reminiscing, crying a little. Now it was really happening. The hospital called, her mother said, locking the apartment door one final time. Richard's transfer is all set for tomorrow morning. They'd visited him yesterday, too. He looked better, stronger, less haunted. The doctor said the regular meals and medication had done wonders. Michelle texted me the address for your apartment, Angela said, helping load the box. I already put it in my phone for spring break. You better come. Jasmine hugged her friend tight. Who else is going to help me decode Detroit slang? Girl, you're going to need way more help than that. The neighborhood was waking up as they loaded the last few boxes. Mrs. Chun from the bodega came out with a bag of snacks for the road. The shelter volunteers who'd helped look for Richard waved from their morning rounds. Ready? Her mother asked softly. Jasmine looked up at their old window, now with new glass catching the morning sun. Ready? The drive to the hospital took longer than usual. Morning traffic, plus Mr. Rodriguez was careful with his van. They found Richard in the physical therapy room, working with elastic bands. Moving day? He asked, seeing their clothes. Right after we see you off tomorrow, Jasmine's mother confirmed. Michelle said the apartment's all ready. Richard's face lit up at his daughter's name. They talked every day now. Video calls, regular calls, constant texts. Making up for lost time. She told me the science center's just 2 blocks from your new place, he said to Jasmine. Once I'm settled, maybe we could visit together? If you want, I'd like that. Jasmine watched him stretch the bands. How's therapy going? Slow. But the doctors say I'm improving. He gestured at his legs. Sleeping on benches isn't good for old joints. A nurse appeared with paperwork. Mr. Thompson? Transport documents for tomorrow. Richard signed where indicated, his hands steady. No more shaking, no more hesitation. Lisa sent pictures of my room at the facility, he told them. Private bath. Window overlooking a garden. Too much, really? It's exactly what you deserve, Jasmine's mother said firmly. They stayed until lunch, watching Richard work with the therapist, his determination evident in every movement. Finally, it was time to go. See you tomorrow, Jasmine promised. Bright and early. Wouldn't miss it. Richard caught her hand. Thank you, both of you, for everything. Outside, the van waited. Angela had stayed to help with last-minute errands, changing addresses, picking up prescriptions, all the small details of moving lives. Post office is done, she reported. Mail's all set to forward. They drove to the library next. Mrs. Peterson had insisted on a proper goodbye. I have something for you, she told Jasmine, presenting a canvas bag. Inside was a brand new physics textbook for the summer program. And this, she handed over a small box. Jasmine opened it to find a smartphone. Mrs. Peterson, we can't dash. You can and you will. The librarian's voice brooked no argument. The library board took up a collection. After what happened with your old phone, Jasmine's vision blurred. Thank you. Just promise to text sometimes. Let us know how you're doing. Back in the van, Jasmine set up the new phone while her mother and Mr. Rodriguez discussed routes to Detroit. Angela helped transfer contacts, add important numbers. Richard's daughter's already programmed in, she noted. Mrs. Peterson thought of everything. They spent the afternoon moving boxes to the van, Tetris style. Their whole life fit with room to spare. Feels wrong somehow, her mother murmured. 14 years in this city. But think about what we're moving toward, Jasmine reminded her. Not what we're leaving behind. Evening found them at their favorite pizza place, a goodbye dinner with Angela's family. Mrs. Peterson came too, and Mr. Rodriguez, and Mrs. Chun. Even some of the shelter volunteers stopped by. To new beginnings, Angela's mother toasted with her soda. And the people who make them possible. Later, in their empty apartment, Jasmine and her mother shared the twin bed one last time. Scared? Her mother asked. A little. You? A little? Her mother's laugh was shaky. But excited too. Yeah. Jasmine stared at the fixed window, remembering broken glass and bricks with threats. Me too. Morning came too quickly. The hospital was busy with transfer preparations when they arrived. Ambulance is ready, a nurse told them. Family riding with him? They'll meet us there, Richard said. He was dressed in real clothes today, new ones Michelle had sent. Jasmine? Would you? She took his hand as they wheeled him out. Her mother followed with a small bag of belongings. The ambulance gleamed in the morning sun. Richard squeezed Jasmine's hand. Race you to Detroit? She laughed. Pretty sure the ambulance will win. I don't know. Mr. Rodriguez drives pretty fast, but they all knew he didn't. The ambulance would arrive hours before them. Richard's daughters waiting to welcome their father home. Time to go, Mr. Thompson, the paramedic said. One last squeeze of hands. One last look at the hospital where everything had changed. See you in Detroit, Jasmine promised. See you in Detroit, Richard echoed. They watched the ambulance pull away, lights flashing. Another goodbye in a morning full of them. Ready? Her mother asked. Jasmine looked at their loaded van. At Angela waiting to see them off. At the city skyline where she'd grown up. Yeah, she said. Let's go home. The van started easily, pointing east toward Detroit. Toward new rooms and fresh starts and second chances. Toward a physics teacher and his daughters, a summer of science, and the kind of family that grows not from obligation but from choice. From stopping to help when others walk by. From letting yourself be helped when pride says run. From learning that sometimes the longest journey starts with a broken phone, a shattered window, a simple act of kindness that ripples outward like light through newly cleaned glass. Jasmine watched Chicago shrink in the side mirror, her new phone warm in her pocket, full of numbers and promises and possibilities. Ahead lay Detroit, and everything after. Detroit looked nothing like Chicago. The streets were wider, the buildings shorter, the pace somehow different. Jasmine pressed her face against the van window as Mr. Rodriguez navigated the final few blocks to their new apartment. There it is, her mother pointed. The red brick building. It was nicer than their old place. Clean sidewalks, small trees and planters, actual security doors. Michelle stood waiting outside, still in her hospital scrubs. You made it. She hugged them both as they climbed out of the van. Dad's all settled in. He's been asking when you'd arrive. How is he? Jasmine helped unload a box. Good. Tired from the trip, but good. Lisa's with him now. Michelle grabbed another box. Let's get you two settled first, then we'll visit. The apartment was on the second floor. No broken windows, no garbage bags, no water stains on the ceiling. 2 bedrooms. Actual bedrooms with doors that closed. A kitchen with counter space. A living room with a worn but clean couch Michelle had found at a thrift store. It's not much, Michelle started. It's perfect, Jasmine's mother interrupted. It's more than perfect. They brought up boxes, Mr. Rodriguez insisting on helping despite the long drive. By late afternoon, everything was inside. Thomas see your father? Michelle asked. The care facility was modern, all glass and steel. Nothing like County General back in Chicago. They found Richard in his room, Lisa helping him arrange photos on a bedside table. Look who finally made it, he smiled. The room was bright with afternoon sun. Garden views, just like he'd said. A physics textbook sat prominently on the windowsill. Thought we could start reviewing, he told Jasmine. For your summer program. Dad, let them rest first, Lisa laughed. They just drove 6 hours. But Jasmine was already reaching for the book. Maybe just a quick look? They spent the next hour there, Richard explaining concepts while Lisa and Michelle shared knowing looks. Jasmine's mother talked with the nurses, learning the schedule, the rules. Visiting hours are pretty flexible for family, the head nurse said. Family. The word settled warm in Jasmine's chest. Evening came too quickly. Richard needed rest, and they needed to unpack. "See you tomorrow?" he asked. "Try and stop us." Jasmine's mother smiled. Back at the apartment, Michelle helped them organize the kitchen while Lisa ordered pizza. "Mom's first day at work is Monday," Jasmine said, putting away dishes. "The office is excited to have her," Michelle replied. "We need more people who understand, who really care." A noise from the living room made them look out. Jasmine's mother stood frozen, staring at something in an open box. "Mom," she held up a frame, her teaching certificate from years ago. "Found it when we were packing," Jasmine explained. "Thought maybe it was time to put it up again." Her mother traced the glass with trembling fingers. "Maybe it is." The next few days passed in a blur of unpacking, settling in, learning new routines. Mr. Rodriguez drove back to Chicago. Angela called every night. The Science Center sent information about summer orientation. A week after they arrived, Jasmine's mother came home from her first day of work glowing. "How was it?" Jasmine looked up from her physics homework. Richard had already assigned chapters to review. "Good? Really good?" Her mother hung up her new work badge. "Different from teaching, but good different." "How was your day?" "Richard taught me about velocity vectors." Through the window, watching the birds in the garden, her mother smiled. "He's really enjoying this teaching thing again, isn't he?" Lisa says he's talking about tutoring other kids at the facility once he's stronger. There's a high school nearby. The doorbell rang, Michelle and Lisa bringing dinner. It had become their routine, these family meals. "Dad's got a surprise," Lisa announced as they set out containers. "He stood today. Just for a minute, but still." "The physical therapist says he's progressing faster than expected," Michelle added. "Determination," she says. "More like stubbornness," Lisa laughed. "He wants to walk you to the Science Center for your first day." Jasmine's chest tightened. "That's still weeks away." "Tell that to physics teacher, Dad," Michelle grinned. "He's got it all planned out." After dinner, they video called Angela, passing the phone around. She approved of the apartment, demanded more pictures, promised to visit soon. Oh, she remembered something. "Mrs. Peterson says the library board loved your thank you letter. They're starting a program, helping homeless people reconnect with family. They're calling it the Thompson Initiative." Jasmine looked at her mother, at Richard's daughters who had become their family. At their new home where broken things were mended and second chances grew like garden flowers outside a hospital window. "Tell them thank you," she said softly. "For everything." Later that night, in her own room, Jasmine finished her physics homework. The concepts were starting to make sense, vectors and velocities mapping paths through space and time. Like the path from a Chicago bench to a Detroit garden. From a broken phone to a healed family. From a girl who stopped to help to a father who learned to accept it. Her new phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "Ready for tomorrow's lesson?" Thinking about gravitational forces, she smiled, typing back. "Always ready." Another buzz. Angela sharing a photo. Richard's old bench in Chicago, now with a proper plaque. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change everything. Jasmine touched the words on her screen. Thought about broken windows and bricks with threats, about eviction notices in hospital rooms, about daughters searching and fathers hiding, and all the ways people could lose and find each other. About how helping others sometimes meant letting them help you too. About how family wasn't always what you were born into, but what you built together piece by piece like equations balancing on both sides. About how home wasn't always a place, but the people who made space for you in their lives. Her mother's voice called from the kitchen. "Baby?" Michelle brought pie. Jasmine closed her physics book, set her new phone on her new desk in her new room. Coming. Outside, Detroit's evenings settled soft around their building. Inside, family waited with pie and stories and plans for tomorrow. Tomorrow, when Richard would practice standing again, determined to walk her to her first day of class. Tomorrow, when her mother would help someone navigate medical bills with compassion learned from hard experience. Tomorrow, when Angela would call with Chicago news, and Mrs. Peterson would send more books, and the garden outside Richard's window would bloom a little brighter. But tonight was for pie and physics homework and the quiet joy of broken things made whole. For the gift of starting over. for the simple truth that sometimes the longest journey ends exactly where you're meant to be. Home. Together. Whole.